Hello and welcome to the MBOM podcast, where you will learn to master the business of yoga with guests from around the world who have experienced becoming successful yoga teachers, studio owners, and much more. Now, here's your host, Amanda Kingsmith.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the MBOM podcast. I am so excited that you've decided to join me for this episode of the show. This week on the podcast, I am joined by Katie Brauer. Katie is a yoga teacher. She's a former professional snowboarder. She's a former executive of one of the fastest growing boutique yoga studio chains in the US. She's also the creator of the Yoga Professional Incubator, and she is pretty much the definition of yoga business badass, in my opinion. She has so much experience in the yoga space. She's worked with so many different people. She's trained a ton of yoga teachers. And on this episode, we kind of just jam around the topic of yoga business, entrepreneurship. We also talk about money and blending spirituality, which if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you know, I'm really big on kind of, solving this mystery of the yoga space. You know, how do we make money while still keeping our spirituality? So Katie and I talk about a ton of different stuff, and I hope that you guys really, really enjoy this episode of the show. Before we dive into the episode with Katie, I want to announce a brand new partnership that I have, and that's with BeYogi. So BeYogi is an online resource dedicated to providing yoga teachers and students with the inspiration and information and insurance that they will need during every step of their yoga journey. BeYoga has drawn from their knowledge of the yoga world to not only create incredible content, but to also provide yoga and wellness professionals with the insurance coverage they will need to expand their careers. And I don't know about you, but I know that I run into a lot of places that won't let me teach or offer any type of programs if I don't have insurance. So this is definitely something that if you don't have insurance, you'll want to check it out. They also have incredible things like online teaching coverage, and you can also get coverage for wherever you are in the world. So if you're somebody who offers retreats or workshops abroad, they've got you covered. And as much as I love the business side of yoga, if I'm being completely candid, insurance is never something that I've been super, super stoked on. I feel like it's this topic that's kind of confusing. We're never really sure what we need. What policy do we need? Can we trust the company and the people that we're working with? And one of the reasons that I was super excited to partner with BeYogi is I've had so much contact with their team personally. They are an amazing group of people who are really trying to better the yoga industry and make it easier for yoga teachers to get the coverage they need without it being confusing and convoluted. And you can just leave the experience having a little peace of mind, knowing that you're covered should something happen. So if you are a yoga teacher who is needing insurance or maybe isn't happy with their current insurance plan, head on over to beyogi.com/MBOM. So it's beyogi.com/MBOM, and you can get your insurance for $179 for 12 months. And on the page, they also offer a student discount. They also give you your coverage limits and all that good stuff, as well as if you want to talk with somebody, they're really, really easy to chat with. They've got a phone number right on the page that I'm sending you to. So definitely go check that out. And of course, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to let me know. And of course, a big thank you to BeYogi for partnering with me and for sponsoring this episode of the show. And thank you to you guys for always being willing and open to listen to these ads and to just be open to the partnerships that I'm creating. It's not about the money, it's about the opportunities. With that in mind, we've got today's Schedulicity hot tip of the week, and it is all about creating online businesses, which works really well with the topic that we're talking about today with Katie. So here is Brendan with the hot tip.
Hello, yoga business badasses. This is Brendan with the Schedulicity hot tip of the week. Schedulicity takes all of the guesswork out of creating an online business. You can stay organized and keep your booking, class rosters, payment processing, detailed analytic reports, and email marketing all in one place. Offer deals and stay in contact with your clients effortlessly. It's easy to follow our step-by-step setup instructions, and you never even have to leave the couch while you professionally establish your business or take your existing organization to the next level.
And make sure you go check out Schedulicity at schedulicity.com or send one of their support rock stars an email at support@schedulicity.com. And again, thank you to Schedulicity for sponsoring this episode of the show. And thank you guys for going and checking out Schedulicity. It is seriously such an awesome platform and really a one-stop shop for all my yoga business needs. All right, now on to today's episode of the show with Katie Brauer. Katie, welcome to the podcast today. I'm super, super excited to be chatting with you today.
Amanda, thanks so much for having me. I also will join your enthusiasm in being here.
Yeah, I'm super excited for this conversation. I think we're going to dive into some really awesome stuff. But before we kind of get into more of the career type stuff, can we back up and talk about your yoga story and how you first got into yoga?
It's really kind of short and sweet, actually. At the time, back in my late teens, I was sort of newly in my professional career as an athlete. I was a professional snowboarder. And my coach at the time, my dryland coach, said to me, hey, you know what? You're tight in your body. And you're really uptight in your attitude and your mentality. So I think that it might actually be helpful for you to integrate yoga into your dryland training. And that was, I had never even heard of yoga. So that was how I got into it.
What were sort of your thoughts of yoga? Like, I feel like I have never been a professional snowboarder, but I did grow up skiing because I'm from Western Canada. So I know that there's kind of like much more adventure and exhilaration behind like snowboarding and skiing than there is with yoga. So what was kind of your like first experience?
My first experience, honestly, was not a good experience. It was very, honestly, uninviting. The whole class was in Sanskrit. I didn't find the teacher to be very warm at all. Like she didn't come over and introduce herself or kind of check in with me. And it felt very cliquey. And it was very uncomfortable in my body. So I was in a fair amount of discomfort throughout the class. And there was no context for anything that was being taught. Like there was a lot of philosophy and a lot of Sanskrit, and I just felt so out of place and so uncomfortable. It wasn't a good experience. It was more sort of anxiety inducing than some of the benefits that I had read about the practice, which was, being calm and like reducing stress and stretching your limbs. I was definitely doing that, stretching my muscles, but it didn't feel supportive or empowering at all. So it was a bit of a turnoff, to be honest.
Interesting. And was it your dryland coach that like kept you coming back?
I was turned off enough that I didn't actually go back for about a year. And then this was at the time I was living in Vail, Colorado, and some classes popped up, quote unquote, yoga for athletes. And I thought, oh, okay, well, I'll try that. And it was interesting because the yoga for athletes was like this crazy intense workout. And I was like, this isn't what athletes need that are coming to yoga. So I sort of tried that and then dropped that because it was not, I was already doing a lot of strength training and I didn't need yoga for that component. And then I was introduced to a woman by the name of Kelly Heath in Vail, Colorado, and I took her class, and it was completely the opposite experience than I had had that first time. And she was so warm and welcoming and just awesome. And so she really lit that fire of, what it was like to feel inclusive in a community that was foreign. And that was really what kickstarted my journey, which, in the beginning, it very much was just the physical practice. I was going to stretch. And then it really morphed over the years into much more of a multidimensional practice, and the emotional and energetic components of it that supported me and served me through some pretty catastrophic injuries that I had snowboarding. And that was really the tipping point for me, where I felt like I opened up Pandora's box, and I've been down that rabbit hole for 20 years. And very satiated and very engaged in the process and the conversation and the continued learning. So
yeah, that's incredible. I'm glad that you went back to that other class. Like, it's crazy to think about an alternate life path where you just never go back to yoga because of that bad, like, one class that you went to.
Right. It's kind of like Gwyneth Paltrow in Sliding Doors. I don't know if you've seen that movie, but have you seen that movie?
No, I haven't.
So it's basically two scenarios in the movie. One is that she runs down the escalator to a train platform and makes it on the train. And then the other is where she doesn't make it on the train, and sort of what unfolds in those two scenarios and how absolutely different they are. And I really think about that a lot because yoga has given me so much in my life, so much healing and self-understanding and the ability to connect with people and support them in transformative experiences. And I literally cannot imagine my life without it, so I almost missed the train.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's wacky to think about, but I'm glad that the train came, that you got on it, and that we're here today talking about this because of that. So
me too.
I'm curious, along your journey, what inspired you to take your practice from just practicing to becoming a teacher?
Each time I got injured snowboarding, which was a lot, I've always been fascinated by, the body and the mind connection. And so I early on was a personal trainer, and then I went to massage school. I did a 2-year program of classical Pilates and been very, very interested in like movement modalities my whole life. And so it was this sort of natural progression toward yoga. And specifically what inspired me was really some of those teachers in the early days and my fascination with their ability to hold a space and to dive in and to share these teachings in a way that were applicable and accessible, and that really created immense shift in my own life. And that was obviously Kelly was one of the first. And then at the time when I was living in Colorado, Justin and Jamie Allison, they were Anusara teachers way back when. And I did several immersions with them, as well as with Todd and Ann Norian. And then a little bit later, I studied with Devashi Stephen Hartman and Dina Bandhu Garrett Sali at Kripalu. And Shiva Ray was a little, like maybe a decade later. And so they all just really inspired me by the way in which they were showing up and their depth of knowledge. And that was what inspired me, to develop the skills and the capacity to facilitate these experiences that they had facilitated for me and share that with others.
Yeah, that's really incredible to hear. I always love stories that kind of start with like having teachers that you really resonate with that are sharing something that's really impactful to your life and kind of wanting to go down that path as well. I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
And so
it's pretty magical.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you started teaching 20 years ago, you said?
Yeah, when I was 20. So I actually just turned 20. I guess I was like almost 21, and I turned 41 in November. So it's been kind of right on that 20-year cusp.
Wow, that's amazing. And I'm curious, can you tell me a little bit about your yoga career, like from the point of being a newer yoga teacher to how you got to where you are now, like working with yoga teachers and that sort of thing?
Yeah, like I mentioned before, I was already a practitioner and teaching these other modalities, primarily Pilates at the time. And it was a natural progression into yoga. So I was in this unique position during my snowboarding career because I had sponsorships, so I didn't, quote unquote, have to work. But I was also honestly quite bored. I would be on the hill for 5 hours in the morning and then come off the mountain and do a couple hours in the gym and steam and sometimes rehab and that type of thing. And I felt like as a 19, 20-year-old, I felt like I was wasting time, and all of my friends had jobs. And so during my career, I started teaching and I started doing massage therapy because there was pockets of time that I had where I was like, I could be utilizing this, doing something that I love. And there was no pressure because I didn't have to do it. You know what I mean? Like my baseline needs were met financially. And it was really, truly from pure passion. And when I retired from snowboarding, I got what I refer to as a quote unquote real job, a corporate job with the US Snowboarding Association. And there was aspects of it that I really enjoyed, putting on snowboarding events, but there was the majority of it. I was like, this is ridiculous. I do not like this at all. And I was making $16 an hour or something insane. And I thought, why am I doing this? I'm doing this because this is what I'm supposed to do, or it was this sort of pressure that I had put on myself. And I did that for a year. I was like, I'll see this through for a year. And then I was still doing massage therapy and being paid really, really well for that, and being paid well for my private Pilates clients. And I decided I had this, it was sort of like another fork in the road, which I often think about, I wonder what would have happened had I chose to turn left instead of turn right. And at the end of that job, I was offered a job with Red Bull, and it was what was called like a roaming marketing manager, I think, or roaming program manager or something. And it was really good money. It was over 6 figures. I was in my early 20s, so that was a considerable amount of money. And I sat with it and I was like, I just don't think I can do that. Like, it's not aligned with my truth and what I feel like my gifts are and my purpose and my calling. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to pursue yoga as a career. And I really looked at and sat with, what does success to me mean on this path? Because I had no interest in being a broke yoga teacher. And it's funny because my sister always joked early on, she called me the Prada Hippie because I didn't fit the stereotypical like yoga person. And I don't know. I mean, I like nice things. I like going to nice restaurants. I like having a nice car. And there was this inner sort of conflict around like, wait, can I have money and follow my passion and be a yoga teacher? And so I sat down and really looked at, I've always been like a long game player. And I think part of that has come through my athletics of like setting goals really far out and visualizing and strategically planning to meeting those goals. And so I sat down and I mapped out, okay, like if I'm going to consider doing this seriously and I don't want to be broke, how am I going to do it? And I mapped out 1, 3, 5, 10-year plan and where I wanted to go and what my vision was and why I wanted to do it, and started really taking action. So I, of course, I got certified and began teaching classes. I actually started teaching classes before I was certified, because back then it wasn't like it is now. You know what I mean? Like, you were immersed and studying with a teacher and then sort of went from there. And I had my background in Pilates and had spent years teaching that. So that happened. And then I, developed a teacher training. So I didn't actually, like from the get-go, it was like looking at that long-term plan. The training really developed over years, and I continued to study and just sort of chipped away at it and incorporated all of the modalities that I studied. And that was, biodynamic craniosacral therapy, and I did Reiki, and I traveled to India many times and through Southeast Asia and learned this modality called Sujuk, and, really took all of the things that had been instrumental and profoundly impactful in my own healing and incorporated that into developing a 200-hour training that not only, supports teachers in graduating and being able to teach a multidimensional class that's transformational, but also I really realized having teachers' attention or people's attention for, a 4 to 6 month period is really rare. And how can I pass along and transmit the things that have been so powerful in my own life to them so that they can apply them to their daily life, in the living yoga, beyond just the teaching aspect. And so that was that. And that was 11 years ago that I taught my first teacher training. And then I went on to develop a 500-hour with my peers, Danny Arguetti. He's authored a couple of books. One is Nourishing the Teacher, which I highly recommend for every yoga teacher on the planet, as well as The 6 Qualities of Consciousness. Also highly recommend. It's more of advanced application into the philosophy of yoga. And Kobe Kozlowski. So the three of us taught a 500-hour training here and in India for several years. And then that sort of, also, I guess early on in my career, I was primarily working with professional athletes and primarily men. And after many years of doing that and having great success and working with some really big known Olympic athletes and professional athletes, I was like, okay, I'm ready for the next challenge. And I decided that next challenge was owning a yoga studio. So kudos to all of the human beings out there that own a yoga studio that love it, because I did not love owning a studio. I got so bogged down in the operations, and it was like trying on a sweater that looks really good on the rack, and then you put it on and it's like, ew, this is really itchy. And
I love that analogy.
You know what I mean? So I was like, this is interesting. And so I did that for about a year and a half and sold the studio. And then I had the opportunity to, this was again another real big mile marker in my career, and a pivotal moment. I had the opportunity to license my programming and methodology to a company that was planning to expand. And I thought, wow, this is a phenomenal opportunity for me to spread my reach and to connect with more people and to serve my purpose. And so I did that, and I worked for them. The company is called Yoga 6, for 5 years on the executive team, and we opened studios across 6 markets. And throughout that time, I got to meet, thousands of teachers and open up all of the studios. And I really, in conversation with the teachers, I heard from everyone, the challenges that they were having professionally in terms of making money and being burned out. And that inspired me to create my online business and leadership training, which is called the Yoga Professional Incubator. And that's a 6-month program. And it really combines the internal work and this relationship between inner and outer worlds with solid business foundations and the launch pad that you need to really set yourself up for long-term success. And there's massive personal transformation that occurs in this program. And then what did I do? Then I stepped out of my role with Yoga 6, and the company has gone through sort of some more evolution. Of course, it's grown, and people will start to see them popping up everywhere because they were acquired by Exponential, who also houses Club Pilates and the Row House and Cycle Bar. So I think they're on track to open over 100 studios in 2019 going into 2020.
Wow, that's incredible.
So that's pretty amazing to see that growth and my contribution to that. It's definitely not today. It's different than it was when I was there, but there's some really key people there that I worked alongside with for many, many years that are really keeping the integrity and the core of, the heart of the programming. And, Yeah, and then now, now I teach a couple classes a week, and I have my online program, the Incubator, and I teach my teacher trainings, and then I also run a year-long licensing / mentorship program for teachers that want to teach their 200-hour, teacher 200-hour, and that is, I just limit that to 10 people a year and give them everything that they need to be able to sort of step forth in that journey, which is so freaking fulfilling. All of it is fulfilling, but it's all good.
Yeah. Wow. That's such an incredible story. I was just thinking about you've done so much cool stuff over the last 20 years as a yoga teacher. One thing that stands out to me that I want to dive into a little bit is the conversation around money. And I think it's really interesting that right from the get-go, you had this nickname of the Prada Hippie. That was it, right? The Prada Hippie?
Yeah.
Yeah. I really like that because I think that, I came to yoga from a corporate background. So I think I definitely had some issues with money coming from my childhood, but it was never really because of the spirituality of yoga or because I felt like I shouldn't get paid because of yoga. And so I think coming into the yoga space, I was a little bit kind of confused by that element of it. And I'm curious kind of what your thoughts are around, I guess, the money side of yoga. How do we mix yoga and spirituality and make sure that we get paid while still, teaching something that's authentic to us?
Yeah, it's such a great conversation and one that I'm very committed to inspiring more of in the yoga community and the community at large, really, to be honest, because money is such a taboo topic, period. But, early on, I just was so confused of why? Why can't you be a yoga teacher and be on this path of spirituality and wear nice shoes and travel and stay in nice place? Why does it have to be this sort of, at least what was portrayed to me and what was exemplified to me was no, you really need to refrain. And I remember in the early trips that I did to India, where I would have 2 pairs of pants and 3 shirts and not look in the mirror for 4 or 5 months and really be so at peace and so happy showering out of a bucket, and then come home and be but wait, the new MacBook's out. I want to go and get that. And this is back in the day of the mini disc before even the iPod. Mm-hmm. And then have this inner conflict of wait, I just spent $180 on a pair of jeans. Should I be doing that? And it was several trips that I took. And I would be on the plane on the way back and say, yeah, look, I can, I don't need things to be happy. And then I would sort of say to myself, okay, so just refrain from buying anything. And I got to a point after a couple of years, I'm why? This is silly. I can have both. The things don't define me, but I can have desire and preference. And so I just completely let that go and stepped into, I like really nice things and it doesn't make me less spiritual. And I have a 401k and I own a home and that type of thing. So I think that it's really looking at reframing your view on money and understanding where your current viewpoint and is coming from, who has influenced that? Because for me, I was conflicted between what I was seeing and experiencing in the yoga world and what my parents sort of instilled in me around money. And so there was this incoherence between the two of those things until I just found my own truth. And I think also, really looking at, because so many yoga teachers are struggling, it's definitely one of the most commonly spoken about things is burnout for yoga teachers, and then sort of this lack of sustainability and not having enough money. And that, for me, is really looking at, what is happening inside, what's in the internal landscape where there is belief systems and structures and wounding around money, and how is that being reflected in your outer world. And, there's this great quote, I always quote this James Allen quote, which is, circumstance doesn't make the man, it reveals him to himself. And that to me really says, like, if we're not happy with what is happening in our external circumstances, it's ultimately a reflection and an invitation to go inward and get out the flashlight and start doing the archaeological dig on ourselves and uprooting and turning over every stone. And that honestly doesn't end. I mean, here I am sort of 20 years later, and I have been, successful by my own terms. And then I would say societally, very successful beyond yoga and extremely successful financially in the domain of yoga. But I still am in this inquiry around, money. And most recently, really looking at, I've worked really hard for the wealth that I've created. And this curiosity and I'm tired. Like, I'm definitely tired. And personally, over the past year, I have been through the eye of the needle in terms of health challenges and surgeries that I've had and relationship stuff. And I've really been sitting with, like, wait, where did that come from? Because there's something in there that's like, I got to work hard for my money. And that definitely was influenced from my mom, being a single mom of 3 kids, and she still works hard. She's always had the means and financial abundance, but she's worked really hard for it. So that's, the journey never ends. And I think lastly on the money piece is, I say this to teachers a lot, is once you get clear on what it is that you want, because success for everybody looks really differently. And it's so multidimensional when you define success. Like, finances are just one piece of success. And just from that financial standpoint, when you're clear on what success means for you, like for some teachers, it's to make 40 grand a year. For others, it's to make multiple 6 figures. And really looking at, who out there in the landscape, whether it's in yoga or elsewhere, has created what it is that you want to create, and creating connection with them and asking questions and being open to insight and reflection and guidance. So I think that that's really, really important. There was one other thing that I wanted to say about the money piece, and that is, again, it's not just with yogis, it's really everyone. Like, in the Yoga Professional Incubator, there's really 2 modules that are on money. And one of them is very nuts and bolts, and it brings up a lot of discomfort for people, because it's really being willing to take responsibility and accountability for where you are right now, look at money in the face, like eye to eye, do a financial inventory, look at your asset and debt overview, look at your profit and loss of how you're spending your time, what you're earning for your time, and really sit with it and be like, okay, this is where I'm at. And there's such an empowering outcome in being willing to step into that. And I would say, in the program, that module is module 2 and module 3. And it's where some of the biggest transformation happens for people in really shifting their mindset around money and stepping into a place of empowerment rather than avoiding and feeling disempowered and lack and all of that sort of stuff that keeps people stuck.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, there's so much good stuff in there. Thank you for sharing all of that. I feel like, money is it is a very complicated thing. And I think that if anyone's listening and this is kind of resonating with you, I think that internal work is really powerful. I know for me, the beginning of 2018, I was very intentional about like understanding my money story and getting clear on kind of my thoughts around money. And it was really weird because I'm not like a super, super spiritual person, but I did these kind of internal shifts and like money literally started flowing into my life. And I was like, whoa, that's cool.
Boom. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, like to your point about working hard. That's definitely, another story that I'm kind of working through right now is this like, do I really need to be checking my email like every 5 minutes? Is it the first thing I need to do in the morning, the last thing I do before bed? Like we've got this sort of like mentality around I need to be working all the time. And it's like, who are we working for? It's like, are we proving it to ourselves or are we proving it to other people? So yeah, I would definitely agree that there's a lot of that is internal. Hey yogis, I just wanted to take a quick little break to talk about studio growth. Has your yoga studio's growth become stagnant? If you're like many studio owners I talk to, you've tried every marketing tactic under the sun. You started a blog, you're posting regularly on all the social media sites, running challenges, sending out newsletters, blah, blah, blah. Long story short, you're doing a ton of work and barely paying the bills. What if there was an easier way? A way to get new students regularly coming through the door without having to do so much work to get them there. A proven system that will consistently bring in 20 plus new paying students to your studio each and every month. Well, there is. Ron Medlin and his team at GetYogaStudents.com have developed a 3-step system that will help you quickly grow your yoga studio to a 6-figure profits and beyond without being shackled to your business. So if you're ready to grow fast and you'd like the blueprint to help you get started, visit GetYogaStudents.com today to get the exact system Ron and his team uses to help his yoga studio clients add 10, 20, or even 30 new students every single month. On top of that, you get a free 45-minute consultation session. So if you're kind of like, I'm not really too sure about all this, I don't want to fork out a bunch of money without even knowing if this is going to work, head on over to GetYogaStudents.com, book a free consultation, and just talk with Ron. He's got so much knowledge, and him and his team are willing to work with you with your studio's needs. And once again, it's GetYogaStudents.com to start getting more students in your yoga studio. All right, back to the episode. I guess kind of on the side of, I guess like being a yoga teacher, maybe you do the work with kind of the money stuff. And then how do you actually, I guess, sort of apply it into an industry where, people sometimes do have some issues around money. Like, for example, if you're a yoga teacher, you get kind of clear on your self-worth, you walk into a studio and they offer you like $15 for a class. How do you kind of like go about standing your ground on what you believe that you're worth?
This is such a good question. I'm so glad that you asked this because there's a lot of value beyond the monetary piece, right? And that's the thing that teachers need to get really clear about. And one of the biggest mistakes that I see teachers make is that they are sort of putting the eggs all in one basket and teaching a bunch of classes of which there is a ceiling to how much studios will pay in order for them to remain profitable if they are profitable. And so having an expectation of making a bunch of money teaching classes is like not a good expectation because you'll be let down. So it's really shifting the perspective and the mindset around and the intention of like, why are you teaching classes? So classes are important because they create or they provide this touch point for you to connect with your students. But being intentional and strategic about what classes you're teaching, when you're teaching them, and how often you're teaching them and where you're teaching them is really important because ultimately the way that I look at classes is those, there's a ceiling to how much I'm going to make per class. And depending on the studio structure, it could be like when I lived in Florida and was teaching in Florida, there was a studio that I was making close to $300 a class. It was like $5 a head and 60 people would show up every week when I taught. I only taught one class at that studio. And then there was another studio where it was sort of, I think it was like $35 a head and we got $2 per head over 10. All of the structures were very different. And then I moved to California after teaching. I mean, I had been teaching like 12 years or something at that point. And I connected with a bunch of studios and they were like, okay, so we start at $25 an hour. And I was like, oh, okay. And and sort of went through that conversation around worth, and this is my experience, and this is what I'm willing to work for, and this is what I'm not. But also, one of the first studios that I taught at here, it was like as teachers, you would rent the space, and then whatever you made, you made. And there was no openings on the schedule at the studio. And I went to the owner and I was like, I will pay you for me to teach here beyond the rent. So I'm essentially paying like the rent, and then I'm paying her because I knew that once I got my foot in the door and got established in the community, that was going to be, I would much rather teach there where I'm sort of in control of driving traffic to those classes, and my takeaway is $150 to $230 a class, as opposed to being locked into a studio where it was more around the $50 to $100 to $120 with bonus. But beyond that is also looking at, okay, this is my touch point to create connection with students, to introduce them to my other offerings where I'm getting a higher time for money exchange. So that being workshops or retreats, or, in my case, immersions and teacher trainings, and then walking students and really ushering them through this evolution in their own journey, and then also the evolution in the offerings that I have. And that's what I found is, like, you don't have to have 100,000 followers or 1 million followers on Instagram or Facebook. You could. I know a lot of people that do and that are broke. But for me, it's really about creating solid, genuine relationships with students that are really based in service and supporting them in their growth and their evolution. And I can't remember the guy's name. I feel like it's like something Kelly. But he became very famous with this blog post called The 1,000 True Fans. And the whole notion behind it is that you don't need tens of thousands of people. All you need is 1,000 true fans. And when you have that and you have established that genuine connection, they will opt in to whatever it is that you're doing. Mm-hmm. And so I think looking at classes of, like, why are you teaching them beyond being able to be in the classroom and have that offering, but where can you support students in going from there? And I just feel like teachers put way too much weight on that aspect of sort of of their offerings. And then they get burned out and bitter and really bitter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's kind of this vicious cycle where you're like, okay, I need to teach 25 classes at 5 different studios in a week to make enough money to pay rent and eat. And then you don't have any time to do the thing you love. And then you're running around the city, spending more time in your car than you are doing yoga. And it's just, I feel like it just becomes this kind of resentful thing where you're like, this is not what I thought being a yoga teacher was going to be like.
So that is exactly why I created the incubator, because I realized that it was not common to have sort of the mindset and the experience that I had as a yoga teacher, which was one of not struggling. And that was really a result of being strategic. So the incubator really walks teachers through. And I have had teachers come that are brand new, straight out of teacher training, and then 10-year, 12-year, 15-year veteran teachers that are still struggling, and really looking at strategy and looking at the long plan and the long game. And because I genuinely am so worried about yoga teachers down the line that they're not saving for retirement, they're not putting money away, they're not saving money for their kids, college, that type of thing. That's a generalization, but for the most part, that's quite common. And what is going to happen to them down the road? So I feel called and a real responsibility to sort of share my experience and what has been valuable for me with others, and getting them set on a course and a path that is sustainable and that is of service to really reach impact the expanded community.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's like so important to surround yourself with people who do kind of have that same viewpoint as you. Like, I think it's really easy to get caught up in like, maybe I should believe something different, or maybe I should be different. But I think you can find the people who kind of align with your values and your beliefs if you look for them, which is great.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so something else I feel like I hear a lot from yoga teachers is sort of this struggle around actually identifying as having a business, like your yoga teaching being a business, or identifying as a yoga entrepreneur. And an example I can use is even somebody who joined my private Facebook community the other day. And one of the questions is, what is your business? And she said, I don't really understand the question. I teach yoga. And I feel like that kind of embodies the entire thing for me, is like, okay, you're like, yes, of course you teach yoga, but that's like being like, I don't understand, like I cut hair, or I don't understand, like I'm a tax accountant or something like that. Like, it is a business. And I think it's important to identify that way. And so I'm kind of curious, like, how as yoga teachers, if we're struggling with this, how can we kind of like shift to identify as entrepreneurs?
Yeah, this is a great question as well. I think first and foremost, it's making a commitment to professionalism and this being a long-term career, and treating your business like a business. And that means, doing your taxes and understanding how much money is coming in and how much money is going out, and where you're spending your time, and looking at where you are now and where you want to go, what you need to do to get there, who can help you get there, who are you surrounding yourself with, and are they supporting you or inhibiting you in your ability to get there, and understanding like business fundamentals, because it blows my mind that, for instance, one of the studios that I teach at, it is a donation-based studio. And as teachers, it's kind of like a co-op. We pay rent for our class, and then whatever comes in, we take home. And, I have a spreadsheet, and every week when I teach, I write down how many people paid cash and what they paid, and how many people paid Venmo or PayPal, and how many students came, and I track that. And I look at that each quarter and look at, okay, like, is this a good use of my time, and why am I doing it? Like, what's the point behind teaching these classes? And is this the optimal time slot for what I'm wanting to like give and create? And it blows my mind that is just such a really simple thing that most teachers do not do. And that's necessary, sort of going back to your point about teachers experiencing like, hey, okay, we're going to pay you $15 or $25 for a class. And then, all right, well, 6 months later, them saying, well, I want a pay raise. And it's like, well, do you know how many students have been averaging your class? Do you know what the retention rate is? Do you know what the average cost per head is? So the more informed you get as a yoga teacher, and really it's about stepping up and taking responsibility and treating your business like a business, you can then go to that studio manager and say, I've been teaching this class for 6 months. This is my average attendance. This is the retention rate. This is how much it's increased in the time that I've been there. And this is my request. This is how much I would like an increase for. And essentially what I teach teachers, whether it's through the mentorship or through the incubator, is like, if you are willing to take responsibility and hold yourself accountable and really create your case and be an advocate for yourself, you're going to make it so easy for a manager to just say yes to you, whether that's for a pay raise because you've done the data, you have done all of your homework, and you're, stepping up and into that conversation, or whether it's for a workshop or whatnot. Because studio managers, and this was my experience as a studio owner, it was like I was so bogged down. I would have teachers come to me all the time and say, like, I feel like I should get a pay raise, or I would like to teach a workshop. And the answer to that is, okay. Like, so what are you going to do about it? Like, whereas a teacher that would come to me and say, which this didn't happen until I taught teachers to do it. But it's like, okay, this is the workshop I would like to teach. This is what students will get from the experience. This is the price point. I've looked at the schedule. These are the dates that are open. This is when I would like to do it. Can I do this? Yes or no? And a manager is just like, sure, great. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's really, I think, for teachers stepping up and stepping out and not waiting for someone to hold their hand, but really to forge the path forward. And I've seen that happen rarely, where, there's opportunities all around us all of the time. And I'm sure that some of the listeners can relate to this of perhaps a new teacher has come into town and then all of a sudden it's like they've got all these things teed up and you're like, wait, what about me? I would have liked to have done that. And it's like the opportunity existed before, but nobody sees the opportunity or saw the opportunity. And now that teacher has claimed the opportunity and they're off and running. So it's really looking in those sort of places where it seems like there's no opportunity and getting creative and resourceful. So for instance, one of the biggest complaints that I get from teachers straight out of teacher training is, well, the studio that I want to teach at, their schedule's full. And it's like, okay. And that's literally where they're like, so I give up. Well, my experience was the same. The studio that I first started teaching at, this was when I moved to Florida, after having, taught for years. And then I moved to Florida and it was like the studio I wanted to teach at that was closest to my house was full. Their schedule was full. So I put together a proposal for the owner, the studio manager, and I looked at the schedule. I found a block of time where there was no classes scheduled at all. I went to the manager and I said, I'm willing to teach for free in this time slot where nothing exists right now. And at the end of 8 weeks, we could look at, what the attendance is like and if that is possible to turn into an ongoing class. And they were like, great. And that was how I got on the schedule. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really looking beyond what's right in front of you and getting creative about how to sort of forge a path that supports you and your soon-to-be students.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I love that. I love, professionalism, I feel like is a big one that I put out there. And I also just love the idea of like, just pitch yourself. It's like pitch yourself in a way. And it's like, I like also how you've shifted that. Okay, like I'll teach this for free for 8 weeks. And if it's successful, let's have a conversation about putting it on the schedule. I feel like that is a totally different mindset from, okay, like I'll teach for free. Like I just want to teach. Like I'll just do anything to teach. It's like, It's like being like, I'm confident in my abilities. So I'll prove to you that I'm confident. And then let's have the conversation about if you agree or not after our selected time period.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like looking for the secret door. You know what I mean? Like you can't actually see it initially, but if you sit and you stare at the wall long enough, you'll see that there's like the book that you like need to push and then the secret door opens and then it's like, oh, wow, I'm in. You know what I mean? And I think that when you practice that, at least in my experience is when I practice that, it's like one thing leads to another that leads to another. And there's really, this relationship between, and I talk about this a lot, is like the quantum realm and your, connection to possibility and potentiality and intentionality and where your attention is. And then sort of the Newtonian realm of like cause and effect and action. And that it really needs to be this combination of both, skillfulness in both of those realms, because there's some yoga teachers that are just sort of in this dream state, but they don't really take any action. And then they wonder why they're broke. And then there's sort of the other camp that's like taking massive action, but not thinking about or looking at things from a place of what's possible. And so then they kind of get stuck in a rut in a different way. And I don't know. I mean, it's I think it's magic.
Yeah. There's so much good stuff in there. And I'm excited by all of that. I'm curious, do you have any other kind of big business lessons that you've learned through your career? And I know that's a big question for somebody who's been in this industry for 20 years and has gone through so much, but anything kind of major that you want to leave listeners with today?
I would say the biggest things that have definitely served me is just my commitment to my own personal growth and being a forever student, and, continually stepping outside of my comfort zone. And, getting online and putting programs online was a big edge for me. I resisted it for almost 10 years and big growth edge. So continuing to do that, and then really just understanding the power of relationship and cultivating relationship and being professional in relationship and genuine in relationship. And I feel like this has really been lost, and it's rare these days that I experience it, but sending a follow-up email and a thank you, you'll be getting one of those from me later today. Recognizing when you make a mess, which we all do. I most certainly have made plenty of messes over my lifetime and over my career, is owning it and cleaning it up, because the world seems to get smaller and smaller and smaller. So really establishing strong relationships and a reputation that's, of high integrity, and living the practice, and being real.
Yeah. I think that those are all really important. And I think that, often as yoga teachers, it's you kind of think about all the stuff within the studio, but I think, the stuff on the outside is really important, like saying thank you, sending thank you messages, answering emails in a timely fashion. All that stuff is the type of stuff that will get you references and make people want to put their neck out to refer you to their friends, or feel like they can trust you enough to use their social capital for you, and that sort of thing. So yeah, I feel like that's really, really important stuff.
Mm-hmm. And with your students as well, it's just on a really basic level in class. Today, for instance, I had a gentleman in class that was struggling when we would go from downward dog to lunge or warrior. And I spent some time, I checked in with him after class, and I was like, hey, can I, have you got a few minutes? Can I show you something that will be really supportive and helpful? And propped his hands up on blocks because he had long legs and shorter arms. And we kind of went through that a couple times. And I was like, so feel free to incorporate this into your practice, because that's personally how I practice a lot, because my arms are really short and I have kind of hip stuff from snowboarding, and it's really very challenging for me to step through without swinging my leg out wide. And I have to kind of prop up on my fingertips, and it's just awkward. And he was so appreciative of that. And that's the little thing of showing up for your students and giving them that little bit more. And the result of that, I know when I've been as a student and a teacher has done that for me, of oh, wow, in that big class of 40 people, you noticed me and you care enough about me to pull me aside and give me some homework to do and some insight. Wow, thank you. That makes me feel seen, and it makes me feel good. I'm going to come back to you. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's something, whether it's studio managers or, corporate gigs or retreats or students, everyone is looking for, whether it's conscious or unconscious, if I feel good in your presence, I'm going to come back. And right. What is it that leads to me feeling good in your presence? Or what is it that leads to my students feeling good in my presence? And those are sort of the things that I break down in my programming. And this was one of the things when Yoga 6 reached out. It's okay, your classes are packed in these crazy off-peak times. Why? And I was like, well, it's actually really simple. These are the things that I do. I introduce myself to students. I give everybody props. I give them homework. I follow this methodology. And in my 200 hour, I say to the students, if you do this, I promise you, your numbers will increase. Mm-hmm. It's like go and experiment with it and then come back. Or teachers that come into the 500 hour or the incubator, it's like, go and do this and then report back. And the data is very, very clear.
Yeah, absolutely. On that note, I'm curious, can you tell people a little bit more about the Yoga Professional Incubator, where they can go to find it if they're interested? Because I feel like this is like a perfect resource for people who are interested in kind of like leveling up their yoga businesses.
Yeah, sure. It's the yogaprofessionalincubator.com. And essentially what it is, it's a 6-month online program, and we meet twice a month. There's 12 modules. We meet twice a month for the modules, and we go through everything from, the way in which you're viewing the world and the lens that you look through, to investigating your money story and putting systems and processes in place for your yoga business, and setting up legal and, a really solid foundation, identifying dream clients that you want to work with and where they are and how to actually access them, and really looking at long-term strategy, creating what is your own signature offering. And then go through branding and what it means to facilitate transformational experiences, evolving from a teacher to a professional, marketing and messaging. I mean, it's so robust, and there's so many resources in there. And it is like a kick-ass community. I am blown away every time the program runs, which is twice a year, of how supportive and inclusive the community is of one another, and how willing to share experience and resources, which really just up-levels everyone. Mm-hmm. And participants have the opportunity for hot seats and laser coaching from me. I'm very much in there. It's not like one of those programs that you sign up for and you're watching a bunch of pre-recorded videos. It's like I get in there, I get my hands into everything that we're doing. And because I really do care about yoga teachers and want to support them in creating sustainable, really thriving careers and doing good in the world. And then the mentorship program, that's, like I said earlier, is something that I limit it to 10 people a year. And this is for teachers that are interested in really going to that next level of personal growth and facilitating teacher training. And it is I hold your hand through the entire process from begin to end, and give you all of the tools that you need, and support that in bringing that dream to reality. Because the fact is that there's so many yoga teachers out there that are running teacher training programs that are terrible. And I mean, I just say it bluntly, I'm Australian, so I feel like
you can get away with you can get away with it way more than I can.
But it's scary. It's so scary. And it's a little scary, and the injuries that are going up, and oh my gosh, if I see one more person doing a chaturanga that's ruining their body and their back, I think I'm going to jump off a cliff. And so, just, I have such a robust, intelligently designed teacher training that there is no, if you have a desire to do that, don't go out and try to recreate the wheel, align with someone that's doing it and doing it really well, and have that guidance and mentorship, which saves you honestly from the mistakes and the pitfalls, so that you can fast track yourself in that way. Mm-hmm. And so that, and then I actually have a free download for listeners on leadership. There's actually 2 downloads, and one of them is at katiebrauer.com/leadership. And that is 7 qualities to develop to really go from good to great as a yoga teacher and leader. And then the other one is a checklist to up level from teacher to professional. So it's some of those foundation and fundamentals. And I don't know the URL for that off the top of my head, but we can put that in the show notes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll make sure that that's in the outro as well as the show notes so that people can get that. And then if people want to learn more about you, it's katiebrower.com.
Yeah, katiebrower.com and the Yoga Professional Incubator.com.
Amazing. This conversation's been so awesome. I could definitely just keep talking to you all evening. So thank you so much for your time.
Part two. I don't know. I feel like Canadians are like, I don't know, you're like a sister country. So I've always felt a great connection to Canadians.
Yeah, absolutely. I live in a little mountain town that attracts a lot of Australians. So a lot of really, really good Australian friends.
Where are you?
So right now I'm in Guatemala, but when I'm home, I live like just outside of Banff, Alberta.
Okay. Yeah. I'm actually going to Whistler on Sunday.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Very cool.
I lived there for a while, but yeah. Cool.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time today, Katie.
You are so welcome. I hope it's been valuable for anyone that's listening, and any way that I can support or guide or usher, I would be more than happy to.
All right. I hope that you guys enjoyed that episode of the podcast with Katie Brauer and you're leaving feeling inspired with your business and the money side of yoga and so much more. Make sure you go check her out and see what her offerings are all about. You can find show notes with all the links and all the notes at www.mbomyoga.com. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Mastering the Business of Yoga. You can join the private Facebook community at Yoga Business Badasses. And just a quick reminder that Megan and I still have a few spots left in our upcoming Yoga Teachers and Wellness Professionals Retreat. It's in Nusara, Costa Rica at the Bodhi Tree Yoga Resort, November 2nd to 9th, 2019. It's going to be an epic week of yoga teaching, yoga business workshops, relaxing on the beach, hanging out in the pool, and just spending a week with like-minded people. I feel like for us, our main motivation around this retreat was bringing like-minded people together so that we can learn from each other and with each other in an environment that's entirely yogi entrepreneurs, like people who know what you're going through. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, head on over to mbomyoga.com/retreats to learn a little bit more, or send me an email at info@mbomyoga.com, and I'm always happy to chat with you, answer any questions, etc., etc. All right. Thank you so much for listening today, and I will see you next week. Namaste.